Namaskar everyone. So we were doing this chapter number 13, market equilibrium under perfect competition in microeconomics. We started this chapter in the next class. Let us quickly recall what we have done so far. First of all, we discuss what is market equilibrium. So market equilibrium is a situation in which your demand is equal to supply. When your demand is equal to supply, that point is known as market equilibrium. Corresponding price to the equilibrium is known as equilibrium price, and corresponding quantity to the equilibrium is known as equilibrium quantity. This we did in the last class. And where is the equilibrium stuck? Equilibrium is stuck where supply is equal to demand, where your supply is equal to demand, right? Then we discuss few more points. We discuss this example as well. As to where the equilibrium will be stuck. So equilibrium will be stuck at the third at the price of 3, because over here the demand is equal to supply, because over here the demand is equal to supply. This is the diagram. This also we did in the last class. This is the diagram. This also we did in the last class. This is the equilibrium. This is the equilibrium. This is equilibrium price, equilibrium quantity. Above the equilibrium is the point where excess supply is there. Why excess supply? Because over here supply is greater than the demand, and the short excess demand where demand is greater than the supply. So this we did in the last class. Then we discuss few conditions, the market equilibrium conditions. जिसके अंदर we discuss the price and quantity are positively related. This you have to remember, price and supply are positively related. That means when the price rises, supply rises, and when the price falls, supply falls. The second thing was price and quantity demanded are negatively related. That means if the price rises, demand falls, and if the price falls, demand rises. And the forces of demand and supply operate freely. That means there is no government intervention. Then we started with the new topic, that is change in demand and its effect on the market equilibrium. This was the last topic that we discussed. We discussed 2 cases, and I asked you guys to do the second one as the homework. These were the 2 cases. First condition was increase in demand. So what happens when there is increase in demand, the impact of increase in demand on the equilibrium. And the second case was decrease in demand and its impact on the equilibrium. So these were the 2 cases that you had to do, right? So over there, this we did in the last class. We'll be proceeding further today when we'll be seeing some exceptional situations. So this is the new topic that we are going to start freshly today. Before we proceed further, if you guys have any sort of doubt, please ask me right now. All those students who have joined today for the first time, who were not there in the last class, you guys might be facing some doubts, right? So if in case you have any doubt, please ask me. Sir, ye kaise hua? I asked you guys to study chapter number 5 and chapter number 11, theory of demand and theory of supply, before we proceed to this chapter, because the knowledge of demand and supply is very much important for doing this chapter. The students who have turned their videos off need to turn it on quickly as possible. Gungun, Rudrakshi, Ishan, and Puneet, please turn your videos on. And then we were doing this. I can see few students new over here, Sujal Parekh, and is there anybody else as well? No, only Sujal is the new, Jigyasa Parekh as well. So Sujal and Jigyasa, you guys are new. And Soumya as well was not there in the last class when we started this chapter. So you guys might feel some problems, and Samipta, Saksham, you guys might also feel problem because you were not there when we were doing this demand and supply chapter. So do not worry, we'll be revising everything once the course completes. So do not worry at all. Just try to understand whatever I am teaching. ठीक है, जो भी मैं आपको करा रहा हूँ, बस उसको try to understand it whatever I. The change in demand and equilibrium price. This are where we are going to do some exceptional situations. Then what are those exceptional situations? First one is when supply of the commodity is perfectly elastic, and when supply of the commodity continues to be perfectly inelastic. Now, what do we mean by perfectly elastic supply and perfectly inelastic supply? The perfectly elastic supply means at a certain price, you are able to sell unlimited number of quantities, but due to a slight change in the price, your supply turns to be zero. That means even with the slightest of change in the price, there is going to be huge impact on the supply. So that is known as perfectly elastic supply. And supply is said to be inelastic. Supply is said to be inelastic when there is no effect of change of price on the supply. That means whatever the price may be, the supply remains constant. So now I'm going to tell you what is perfectly elastic supply and what is perfectly inelastic supply. Before I tell you, is there anybody over here who can tell me the shapes of perfectly elastic supply and perfectly inelastic supply? I'm waiting. Before you tell me, let us draw the basis, the perfectly elastic supply curve and perfectly inelastic supply curve over here. Perfectly elastic supply, and over here perfectly inelastic supply, right? So this is done. We'll be doing what? We'll be drawing the curves now. Let us draw them. Y-axis and the x-axis, right? Again y-axis. We'll be doing two cases. That is why I'm drawing them two. And then the x-axis, right? So over here as well, we have got y-axis and the x-axis. Right. So I've drawn the blank drafts of four curves. I've drawn four blank drafts. Let's see what they are. Over here we have got price. On the y-axis we have always got price. On the x-axis we have got quantity. Right. Over here we have got quantity. I do not have space on the lower diagram, so I'm not able to write the quantity. Okay, fine. I will be writing this. I do not know if you are able to see this or not. I believe you will be able to see this. So I've drawn price and quantity on both the axes. Now I'm waiting for you guys to tell me how does perfectly elastic demand curve and how does perfectly elastic supply curve looks like. Just tell me this. I divided the page into the two parts. I've divided the pages into the two parts, right? So you need to tell me what the answers are. Over here. So now what are we going to do? We are going to draw the supply curves and the demand curves. The supply curves and the demand curves. Please pay attention, guys. First of all, we are going to draw the perfectly elastic supply curve. How does it look like? Perfectly elastic supply curve. The perfectly elastic supply curve is parallel to x-axis. This is how perfectly elastic supply curve looks like. This is how perfectly elastic supply curve looks like. Fine. This is perfectly elastic supply curve. And then we have got perfectly inelastic supply curve, which is parallel to y-axis, over here. This is how perfectly inelastic supply curve looks like. This is how perfectly inelastic supply curve looks like. Let us name them. This is supply. Right. So we have named them as well. Over here we have got price. Now, this is the perfectly elastic supply curve. Now we'll be drawing the demand curves. How the demand curve slopes. Do you guys know how the demand curve slopes? Demand curve slopes downward. So we are going to draw demand curves as well, like this. Do not think why I'm drawing multiple curves. I'm drawing multiple curves because we are going to do various cases. That is why I'm just drawing the rough drafts first. Then we'll be proceeding. So over here as well, we've got demand curve. All these green lines sloping downwards is the demand curve. Let me name them for you. This is D, this is D, this is D, and this is demand curve, right? Can you all see this? Can you all see this that we have got an equilibrium. We have got an equilibrium. हमको equilibrium हमारा मिल चुका है. This is the equilibrium point. This is the equilibrium point, right? So point where demand and supply intersect each other is known as equilibrium. Point where demand and supply intersect each other is known as equilibrium point. Is known as equilibrium point. The point where demand and supply meet each other, right? So we have done this. So corresponding to the equilibrium point, we are going to get what? Equilibrium. We are going to get what? We are going to get equilibrium price and equilibrium quantity. So this is equilibrium quantity over here. Equilibrium price is this P1. Over here, this is equilibrium quantity. This is equilibrium quantity. Again, equilibrium quantity is going to remain constant over here. The equilibrium price, this is what we have got. And this is what we have got. So this is the first basic thing that we are going to do. So I have done 4 diagrams. This remains for the 4 cases. 2 cases in perfectly elastic supply and 2 cases in perfectly elastic demand. Perfectly inelastic supply. So do not hurry, guys. Please move according to my pace. Do not be slow. Do not be too fast. Just do whatever I'm asking you guys to do. So we have drawn 4 curves over here. First 2 cases over here on the left hand side are the perfectly elastic supply cases, and on your right hand side is the perfectly inelastic supply cases. Now what is going to happen? We have drawn what? We have got this. This is equilibrium quantity. This is equilibrium quantity. This is equilibrium price. This is equilibrium price. This is equilibrium quantity. Over here we have got equilibrium price. This is equilibrium price. This is equilibrium quantity, and this is equilibrium quantity, right? So I'm going to ask you guys now ki kya have you understood whatever I have done so far? Whatever I have done so far, I have done nothing with the changes. I have just drawn the basic diagrams that you guys need to know how the demand curve looks like, how the supply curves look like, how is perfectly elastic demand and how is perfectly how is perfectly elastic supply and how is perfectly inelastic supply. This is what I have done. So I'm asking you guys, do you have any problem till now? So there are going to be 2 cases. There are going to be 2 cases in both the categories. There are going to be 2 cases in both the categories. First one over here is when the demand increases. So increase in demand, right? Over here. In the second case, what we are going to do is, in this one, we are going to do decrease in demand, right? So again in this one, what we are going to do is increase in demand, right? And over here what we are going to do is decrease in demand. This is what we are going to do over here, right? So I'm now drawing the demand curves, the change demand curves. Already we have got D over here. Can you see this? The green line in all the 4 curves, we have already got the demand curves. Now I will be doing 1 cases in both the categories. Second one is going to be your homework. You have to do it on your own, try to understand on your own. This is what you have to do. Now just see to it very carefully, guys. Whatever I'm doing now, just be very careful, right? This color is perfect. So now we are going this first case. Perfectly elastic supply. Now the supply is perfectly elastic. Now I am just repeating what I said. What does perfectly elastic supply mean? Perfectly elastic supply means that whatever the at particular price, it can sell unlimited number of quantities, and due to slight change in price, the supply gets 0, right? So this is perfectly elastic supply. Now see, guys, even if the demand changes a bit, that means even if the demand increases, now see the demand is increasing. Now the demand has increased. Can you see this? The demand has increased. So with the increase in demand, the equilibrium quantity has moved. The equilibrium quantity has moved over here. Now see with the help of the arrows, your demand has increased. Your demand has increased. Can you see this? Your demand has increased. Your equilibrium quantity has increased, your equilibrium quantity, your equilibrium point has increased as well, and your quantity has increased as well. Let me name it for you. This is equilibrium, this is E1 now, this is E1. The new equilibrium point is E1, new equilibrium quantity is Q1. So what has happened? What has happened over here? Due to increase in demand, price has changed from due to increase in demand, price is constant. Price is constant. Can you see this? Because supply has adjusted itself. Supply is perfectly elastic. So whatever the change has happened in the demand, demand जितनी ज़्यादा increase हुई, supply ने भी अपने आप को उतना ही ज़्यादा increase कर लिया. तो supply is price is constant. That is the reason price has remained constant. Your equilibrium has increased. EQ is for equilibrium, increase, or you can write it shift. Equilibrium shifts rightward from E to E1, right? From E to E1, equilibrium shifts rightward from E to E1, and equilibrium quantity increase from Q to Q1. This is how you need to write down the observations. This is how you need to write down the observation, guys. Keep this thing in mind. This is how you need to write down the observations. First, you need to write about the price, then the equilibrium quantity, and then the equilibrium price. About the three things, you need to write everything. About price, first of all, then equilibrium point, and then equilibrium quantity. So your price has remained constant. Your equilibrium has shifted from E to E1, that is rightward. You need to mention the direction as well. And equilibrium quantity has increased. Equilibrium quantity has increased. So can you guys see this? And this is what? From demand has increased from D to D1. This is going to be named as D1. This is going to be named as D से D1. So whatever there is the change, जो हमारा changed outcome होगा, you will be naming it as D1, E1, Q1, P1 like that. And the original ones are going to be named originally like P, Q, E, whatever it is, right? Have you got this? Have you got this case? Please let me know. So now, perfectly inelastic supply, I am going to move on. The first case is your homework. The increase one is your homework. I'm going to do decrease one for you guys. I'm going to do the decrease one so that you understand it better. Now, what is happening? Now, what is inelastic supply? Inelastic means the supply is going to remain constant even due to the changes in the price. That whatever the price may be, can you guys see here? Whatever the price may be, even if this one, the supply is going to remain constant. The supply is going to remain constant. Whatever the price is going to be, the supply is going to remain constant. Now, what happens in this case if the demand decreases? So when the demand decreases, what happens? When the demand decreases, what happens? Everybody please pay attention. When the demand decreases, what happens? So when the demand decreases, it decreases on the left side. It decreases on the left side. Keep this thing in mind. It decreases on the left side, right? Like this. This is how the demand is going to look like. This is how the demand is going to look like. The demand is decreased. Now your equilibrium point will be changed. Your equilibrium point will be changed. This is going to be E1. This is E1. Quantity is going to remain same, but the price is going to change. The equilibrium price is going to change. This is going to be now the P1. This is going to be P1, right? Your equilibrium is your demand curve has shifted. Let us understand it with the help of arrows. You have to put the arrows. You have to mark everything with the arrows. This is important. Your demand is decreased, your equilibrium has fallen downwards, and your price has gone down as well. Your price has gone down as well, right? So your price has gone down as well. Demand is shifted leftwards, and your equilibrium has decreased, right? So this is done. Name it as D1. Name it as D1. So what are the conclusions now? What are the conclusions? Equilibrium quantity is constant now. Equilibrium quantity is constant. right? Equilibrium quantity is constant. Equilibrium price. So with the decrease in demand, the price has fallen. With the decrease in demand, price is decreased from P to P1, right? Equilibrium price is decreased from P to V1 and the quantity is constant. Your equilibrium moved downwards from E to E1, right? So this is done. These are your conclusions for this one, for this case. I have no space, that is why the whatever I've written is overlapping. So please understand, and if you do not understand, right, ask me. This is the impact of decrease in demand. I hope you have understood this. So again, over here we have got few points. First of all, equilibrium quantity, that is constant. Can you see this? This Q is constant. Then equilibrium price, it has decreased from P to P1, and then equilibrium has moved downwards from E to E1, right? I hope you have understood this, and if there is any problem, please ask me, guys. This is what we have done. I will be showing you this in the book as well. We are going to do few exceptional cases. This is increase in demand. This is what we just did. Increase in demand and decrease in demand, right? Increase in demand and decrease in demand. We did this. This is in the case of perfectly elastic supply. This is in the case of perfectly elastic supply. We did this one right now. This one was your homework. And then the perfectly inelastic supply. Perfectly inelastic supply. These two diagrams I have done. So this one I have done just now. This one I have done just now, right? So you need to read this in your books and understand this. I have shown you how it is done. Please understand this, and that's it for today. We'll be continuing tomorrow. Meanwhile, change in supply we'll be doing tomorrow. We'll be starting in the next class, change in supply. We have done change in demand right now. Now we are going to start with change in demand, which is exactly the same like whatever we have done so far, just the change of direction of the curves, right? That's it for today. And if you guys have any problem, please ask me right now. Thank you so much, guys.